Welcome to a new edition of PSL Living. I'm Christina Ciuperger, your host. So today we're going to talk about a very important topic. This summer, more than ever, we've seen the warnings, high levels of bacteria that have kept our residents and our visitors out of the river. And I know the quality of our local rivers and waterways has always been at the forefront of our council's agenda. And today we have joining us Vice Mayor Linda Bartz and also Jim Moses, the former director of St. Lucie County's Health Department, to give us some insight on this very important topic. Vice Mayor, tell us a little bit about, what the city is trying to do to solve, the water quality issues.
Christina, I am really proud that the city, again, is at the forefront of these issues. And we have been partnering with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and our own St. Lucie County Health Department. And we're engaged in some water quality testing and tracking studies in an effort to identify the sources of bacteria within the North Fork of the St. Lucie River.
Yes, and I know we completed the first portion of that this summer where we did 3 samplings, and that was for the wet season. And now we have the upcoming study, I believe, starting, in the spring to do the dry season as well, too. And then we anticipate a report, early next summer that's going to give us some results. But why did council feel it was important to find the sources of the pollution?
The city wants our visitors and our residents to be able to enjoy our natural resources. It is so important to us. It's important for our residents, for our economy, for our tourism. Everything is affected by that. And in order to do it justice, we really need to do this study so we can target what we can do to correct those issues.
Great. Well, I think it is believed that septic tanks, can be a source of unhealthy bacteria in the river. In fact, I think in 1993, 23 years ago, Jim, while you were the head of the county health department, you authored a report that studied how septic tanks could affect the health of the Indian River Lagoon. That report was called the SWIM report, which I believe stands for the Surface Water Improvement and Management Report. Tell us about the conclusions, regarding septic tanks and more information about that.
Well, we were approached by the South Florida Water Management District to do this study. They didn't have the resources, but they had a little bit of money, so they came to the locals, which is not a bad idea because it's our community. Not only do we have a stake in it, but we know the history behind it. They gave us some formulas, and they set us loose to do research and just about anything we could. And part of the formula was to set priorities on which were the really bad areas which may or were actually affecting the water quality. And as we did the study, we found out that Port St. Lucie at that time, which was primarily septic tanks and wells, Port St. Lucie was a giant culprit in this. When you look at the charts and the maps we put together, Port St. Lucie is this big, large blob south of Midway Road, and it was all red, and it was scary.
And what did the red depict?
The red depict that it's first priority, that should anything come up, should we have any resource to fix this, the red areas should have first priority. Of course, we couldn't tell the communities what they should do, but we could have our very strong recommendations. And Port St. Lucie was, quite frankly, at the top of that list. We had a tremendous population even then. We had a lot of open areas, and we had literally thousands and thousands of septic tanks. And considering that Port St. Lucie is very low-lying to begin with, everything was draining into the river.
Right, and basically septic tanks really haven't changed since they were invented.
They were invented by the Indian Civil Service in the 1890s. And basically it's the same thing. You run all your waste into a sealed box, it sits and settles, and bacteria eat it, and then all the water flows out the other side. Unfortunately, the water is not pure water, it's not drinkable. And so it has to filter through sand, and it was getting to be a real problem here. when it comes to the development, because we had actually, at one time, we stopped development here because we wouldn't issue septic tank permits. Out of Tallahassee instructed us to do that. And in another view, we also were limiting the size of houses that you could put on your yard. And that didn't really work out well with the 80 by 125, because so many people invested in our community hoping to come here for their retirement and build a retirement home. And when they came to retire, we said, you're going to have to limit it to 1,400 square feet. And most people didn't like that because, as you're aware, we're significantly, especially at that time, less expensive to live here than it was up north.
And people wanted to take
So they were
advantage
coming
of that.
with the house they sold up there with pocketfuls of money, and they were more than willing to build great places here.
Sure.
So it was a problem. So it was necessary we do something. Fortunately, I had some good people working for me, and he ran for office and made that a political issue, and it carried on from there. We had nothing but cooperation from the city on that once it came through. So actually it worked out beautifully, very beautifully, and I believe we're still a model for the rest of the state when it comes to conversions from septic tanks into sewer.
Well, because domestic wastewater contains, so much pathogenic bacteria that is an issue.
The problem we were looking at the time, with the small lots, the septic tanks had to go in the front yard, which means they were also on wells, and the wells are going in the backyard. And if you can picture lot or block upon block in our community where you had this surrounded, it was like the Indians surrounding a wagon train, because all the bad stuff was on the outside and all the good stuff was on the inside. And it was our goal at the health department to make sure that what you flushed one week, you wouldn't drink the next, which is crude, but it's basically the point.
And that was sort of, what you concluded from your report was that there was a major issue and St. Lucie needed to address that.
Yes, and it was an excellent thing, because actually we had a municipal government respond well to it. And that's something we kind of didn't expect, because naturally we had always been involved with the local governments, but we also knew that there was some resistance to change, some resistance to expending the money that was necessary to correct this problem. One of the things I would bring up at public meetings is that we will know that your well has gone bad because you're getting sick. That was the big issue. Why should we go to water and sewer?
Wow.
I mean, how do we know we're going to be sick? Well, you don't. Just like if we sneeze right now, I don't know if it's a cold or just dust.
True. Vice Mayor Bartz, was this report a catalyst for the city to take action?
Absolutely. And I applaud our city government at that time. It was not a popular issue with the residents here. They were concerned about cost. They were concerned with what the city was doing. So at a time that going from septic and wells to sewer and water, people were here at meetings that lasted till 2, 3 in the morning with tents set up outside.
I can only imagine.
And, we talked a little bit before coming on air, and I was saying that, I was at some of those council meetings back then, and one of the things that really hit me was the fact that people were getting up and saying, if we don't do something, the VA will no longer provide VA loans for our veterans. And coming from a veteran family and a husband who was a veteran, that really hit home to me.
Too, and to many families in our community, because we do have a substantial veteran population as well.
Absolutely. But the council at the time was strong enough and understood the importance, and they embarked on one of the largest septic tank conversions, I think not just in the state, but in the country.
Yes. And it was also supported by the local health department, very much needed. And I believe the city's goal, was to own and operate the utility.
Yes. It was a utility that started with general development. And if I remember my history right, and okay. Jim, you can correct me, that utility was turned over to the county.
Yes.
And the county didn't have an interest in it.
Right.
And we said, we will take it. And we proceeded to develop the utilities here, which, once again, I think is one of the best in the state.
Sure, and I think it came to fruition in September of 1994.
Yes.
That sort of started the history, with the city's goal to own and manage and operate the utility. And then, of course, there was such a need for expansion, both for water distribution and wastewater collection, because of the growth in the community as well, too.
And we knew, or again, I keep saying, we as a city knew that the expansion would stop. And this community was built by general development as a little retirement community, did not take any infrastructure into account. But what actually happened was this became a family, an affordable family community. So it wasn't just a matter of seniors coming down here, buying houses. You had young families.
And their household needs were of a larger need than maybe, a couple coming down to retire. So now we were looking at homes that were larger and had a greater need for, having a septic tank that could accommodate that, which I'm sure changed the dynamics as well, too.
There were, for the first few years until water and sewer came to the city, 81% of all the septic tanks permits that we issued and were installed were south of Midway Road. So we knew where the growth was, and that was just standard. Year after year, we were government, we keep records, we have to be structured. And same thing, every year I would see the same numbers, 78 to 81%, everything was here. On my 27-year watch here, over 48,000 septic tanks were installed in the area.
Just huge, sure. And I know construction was completed within 12 years, and I think initially the numbers are that we had over 17,000 water customers and over 10,000 wastewater customers, but with that expansion, that count ballooned to over 69,000 on water customers and over 50,000 on wastewater customers. That's a huge, huge growth. It really, truly is.
And the city really tried to take the residents' concerns into play. They provided 10-year no-interest loans so that it would not impact that family so greatly that they couldn't switch over. And they also made any new construction had to go with city water and sewer. So we've come a long way.
Yes, and I think the stats are over 7,000 aging and typically failing private septic systems were taken out of service, and equally as important, over 20,000 new constructions are now using city water and sewer. So that's a very important fact.
The city bent over backwards to make sure this project would work. We went to Tallahassee because the law says if sewer is available, you have to connect within 12 months. Well, that's basically unacceptable because we lived on septic tanks and we know we don't have that kind of money to come through. They set up the financing, which is far better than you can get on an automobile. I mean, you're basically paying principal over 10 years, and you buy a car for 5 or 6 years, and you're paying interest.
Right. So you're lucky if you can get 0% on some of them.
And so it really, you just cannot beat the way they did it. So they massaged the laws at the Tallahassee level. They made it affordable. And what impressed me, and it's something that I used later when I was doing things of a larger scale for my office, is they approached the installation of water and sewer by starting in the least populated area. In this way, they could figure out what would go wrong, because you know something will go wrong every time. And that area, now, of course, now is booming. But at the time, they found out what would go wrong, and they found out what would go right, and they tweaked it, and it really worked out beautifully. Plus the fact the city administration and the city manager at the time was very strict. When there were complaints about the quality of the work, checks did not get signed, and it was very direct at meetings that I have these complaints and I have this check, and I won't touch this check until you handle these complaints. And it was really good to see something like that happen.
Amazing. Vice Mayor, tell us a little bit more about this 10-year interest-free program that residents can take advantage of.
Well, and it is still in place today. So if your septic tank is to fail, you can come to the city, and the city will, unfortunately, sometimes it's a couple of days before everything gets in place, but with the proper permitting, you qualify for that 10-year interest-free loan. And so it makes it
Feasible.
easier. Yeah, feasible, easier to swallow. And if
they don't have to pay that whole fee up front, which is, it's a big deal to a lot of people. And not only that, if that septic tank is failing when they come in, we take care of that at no cost. That's a huge benefit
to the resident until we can get in there. So they are not going without. And again, this was a foresight of a council from some time ago who understood how this was going to affect our water quality, the health of our residents, the health of our businesses, and were willing to make those tough decisions and take those leaps so that we could get to where we needed to go. And we could grow our community.
Well, that too, and support the residents that if they are in that situation where the septic is failing, the city doesn't leave you hanging. They take care of you and they work with you until they can actually convert over and make the switch. They're there to support you throughout this process, which is a big benefit as well too.
The driving point behind this entire water and sewer is that we had a city council that was tremendously courageous. They put up with a lot of personal and public abuse.
Yes, they did.
And they
Comes
did
with
it
the
because right, but it had to be done. It was one of those things. And when you have people coming in, since really nobody is really from here, you have people coming in saying, well, why should I do it? My grandfather did it where I came from. Well, you're basically a pioneer in terms of what you had in New England. So it's going to have to go that way. And of course, what we've seen is bigger houses going in. We've seen nicer houses going in. We aren't a little bedroom community anymore. We actually can have homes that we can say, oh, you want to see something really classy? Well, let me take you over here. You want to build here? This is the place you want to be.
So Jim, reflecting back on these past 23 years, what have you seen change, in St. Lucie as it pertains to the septic tanks?
Other than the fact that my septic tank program completely collapsed because nobody was coming for permits anymore, I've just seen a tremendous amount of growth, and I think in a positive way. The growth itself is not necessarily good, but the way it has been structured. The city council of 20 years ago set things up so it would work correctly into the future, which is what good government should do. And so when I've seen the changes coming, and then I see that you're taking a positive step when it comes to keeping the river clean. I mean, there's more things to worry about, but the health department's there. We've been taking samples since 1905, 2005. Even that's not that old. So, working together, the community can work. It's not just one group of people, it's an entire community working. And as long as we can maintain that, we've got nothing to worry about. And that's what I've seen that we didn't have 23 years ago. We didn't have that cooperation between the community and its government.
Right, and you said a very important thing, that it's an entire community working together. And it's also very important to mention leadership having that strong faith and taking the courage to do what they needed to do to, make this happen. But if, Vice Mayor, if residents ask you, what can we do to help the river, what would you say to them?
If you have a septic tank, convert. Convert, and we will help you. Take advantage of the 10-year interest-free loan. Again, this is not something that was put in place when the process started and then put by the wayside for newer residents, people who have moved here since then. That program has been in place all along, and it is there to help.
And staff is here as well too, that if anyone is thinking about it or if they have questions, they're encouraged to call City Hall, and we'll put them in touch with the right people that can help talk through the process, explain to them the benefits, how they can go ahead and qualify, and what they need to do to get started.
Well, and we've continued to grow, and we have never been just a retirement community. We raise our children here. We raise grandchildren here. This truly is a city for all ages. So we see that. I know I've seen that over the last 30 plus years that I have lived here. And for the City Hall and our utilities to be cognizant of that fact and continue to work with our residents, to me, that's everything.
It is, and it's very important too, because we are the 3rd largest in South Florida and also the 8th largest in the state as far as a city. And so that's a big deal. And I think, things like this are so important to the growth of a city. And the good news is that we have that program here, and
yes,
our city is aware and willing to work with our residents.
And we must do our part for the river.
I agree.
And this, to me, in many ways, is a simple solution. I know that there's much more that can be done, but it is a part of the solution, working together with the health department, the county, all of those municipalities and government agencies working together gets us where we need to be, which is the health of our river.
Yes, and we also need our residents to partake in the program as well.
Absolutely.
Too. They can't get there without them.
No, but we've seen that.
Any of our residents who have not been on the river, either on the tour boat or they just put a canoe or any kind of boat in there, if once you've been on the river, you know why it's so important to our community, because it is like having paradise within literally a chip shot.
Well, it's a focal point for the city, and it's a very important natural environment, and we want to preserve it. And so it draws tourists here, it keeps residents here, it gives children and adults the opportunity to really take advantage of what this county has to offer. And the river itself runs right through the middle of Port St. Lucie, so very important to us.
And businesses thrive.
For sure.
We have businesses out there that count on
the river.
So everyone is impacted here in some way, shape, or form.
So it's important for all of us to do our part collectively together. Well, thank you so very much. I'd like to thank our guests today, Vice Mayor Linda Bartz and former Director Jim Moses. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be right back after these messages.